You picked Kimi K2.7 to save money on a big repo job, and the bill still came in higher than GLM 5.2 would have cost you. That's the trap these two models set, and it's worth knowing before you commit. GLM 5.2 is built for repo-scale coding performance. Kimi K2.7 is built for cost-efficient agentic loops. The question is, which one actually fits your workflow? Alright, so test 1 is cost, the number that bites people. On a high-volume coding agent running a few thousand real-world repo tasks, the per-task gap between these two models adds up to real money fast. We're talking $392 per task for one and $282 for the other, before you even factor in input token rates that differ by about 30%. I went through the official pricing pages and the deep SWE v1.1 benchmark cost data, and Kimi K2.7 is cheaper across every single metric. About 32% cheaper on input tokens, 9% cheaper on output, and 28% cheaper per completed task. The subscription plans follow the same pattern, with Kimi starting at $15 a month versus GLM's $18. Kimi K2.7 takes cost, and I didn't expect the gap to show up on per-task cost too, not just raw token rates. That puts Kimi up 1-0 on the board. I only caught that per-task cost trap because I'm literally inside these coding models every day, running them against real workloads. Has this kind of pricing surprise bitten you? Drop it in the comments. Okay, so test 2 is coding benchmark performance. The real-world consequence is pretty simple. You ship a model into an agent loop, it fails on a hard repo task, and you've wasted compute and time you can't get back. On Deep SWE v1.1, the independent suite that actually throws real GitHub issues at these models, the gap between GLM 5.2 and Kimi K2.7 is 13 percentage points at passo 1. When I went through the data, GLM 5.2 hit 44% passo 1 on Deep SWE v1.1 versus Kimi K2.7's roughly 31%, and GLM ranked number 1 among open source models on that suite. On Frontier Code Extended, a shared independent benchmark, GLM also leads 43.0 to 39.5%. Kimi's strong scores on MCP, Mark Verified, and Kimi Code Bench are vendor reported with no third-party check yet, so take those with that in mind. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. GLM 5.2 takes coding benchmarks, and I had expected Kimi to be closer given its positioning as a coding specialist, but the independent data said otherwise by a wide margin. That ties the board at 1 apiece. Now, test 3 is speed. The concrete failure here is an agent loop that stalls because the model's slow to generate, so your orchestrator times out or your user just gives up. Artificial analysis clocked Kimi K2.7 at 43.2 tokens per second on median output, which they flag as notably slow, and GLM 5.2 at 129.8 tokens per second, which they flag as notably fast. I ran the numbers twice because the gap is that wide. GLM 5.2 is roughly 3 times faster than standard Kimi K2.7 on median output speed, and it also beats Kimi on time to first token, about 1.9 seconds versus 2.84 seconds. Kimi does have a high-speed tier that claims 180 to 260 tokens per second on paper, but it launched resource-constrained and isn't always available. GLM 5.2 takes speed, and the 3x gap on standard throughput is not subtle, even if Kimi's high-speed tier someday closes it. That puts GLM ahead 2-1. So GLM 5.2 is ahead, but context window and deployment flexibility are still on the table, and those two dimensions could completely change which model makes sense for your specific setup. Context in particular hits different when you're working with a full repo, so let's see how far apart these two actually are on that front. Test 4 is context and output limits. The failure mode here is hitting the context ceiling mid-task on a large repo, watching the model lose track of earlier files, and then having to rerun the whole job. One of these models gives you a 1 million token context window. The other gives you 256,000 tokens, and that 4x difference is the whole ballgame for repo scale work. GLM 5.2 runs a fully documented 1 million token context using index share, sparse attention for lossless recall, and a clearly stated 128K output ceiling. Kimi K2.7 tops out at 256K context, and its output limit is provider dependent, somewhere between 131K and 262K depending on where you're calling it, and third-party tests show recall degrading beyond about 180K tokens in practice anyway. GLM 5.2 takes context, and the 4x window advantage is pretty decisive for anyone running full repo agent tasks. GLM 5.2 wins 3-1 on the board. Test 5 is deployment and modality. The concrete problem here is you're building an agent that needs to read a screenshot or a UI mockup, and your chosen model only takes text, so you have to bolt on a separate vision model and pay for 2 API calls every time. One of these models handles images and video natively, the other doesn't. Kimi K2.7 is natively multimodal, taking text, image, and video input without any extra model call, and it's the first open-weight model available on GitHub Copilot and Azure AI Foundry. GLM 5.2 is text-only and needs a separate GLM OCR model for vision, though it does carry a pure MIT license, which is simpler for some enterprise legal teams than Kimi's modified MIT. Kimi K2.7 takes deployment and modality, and I didn't expect the GitHub Copilot integration to be live already, but it is, and native multimodal input is a real workflow advantage. Final score, GLM 5.2 3, Kimi K2.7 2. GLM 5.2 is the clear pick when you need serious coding performance. It leads on SWE Bench Pro at 62.1%, Terminal Bench 2.1 at 81%, and Deep SWE V1.1 by 13 points. Its 1 million token context is 4 times larger than Kimi's. It runs about 3 times faster on standard throughput, and the pure MIT license is cleaner for enterprise use. Kimi K2.7 wins on cost and flexibility. It's 28% cheaper per completed task, cheaper on every raw token metric, and its subscription starts $3 a month lower. It's natively multimodal, so it reads images and video without a second model call. And it's the first open-weight model on GitHub Copilot, which is a genuinely big integration advantage for teams already in that ecosystem. If you're doing repo-scale coding work and benchmark confidence matters, GLM 5.2 is the safer bet. If you're running MCP-heavy agent loops on a budget and need multimodal input, Kimi K2.7 is the one. The deciding number is that 13-point gap on Deep SWE v1.1. If your workload looks like that, GLM 5.2 earns its higher cost. One thing that's easy to miss, Kimi K2.7 has a mandatory thinking mode that eats into its context and output budget before your actual task even starts, so the documented 256K context window is smaller in practice than it looks on the spec sheet. That's not in the quick start docs, and it compounds the context disadvantage versus GLM 5.2. If you're curious how Kimi stacks up against a completely different competitor, I did a full breakdown in Minimax versus Kimi, which is better. And the results there are pretty different from what you just saw here, so it's worth a look if you're still deciding which model family to build on.